Chapter 11, Part 3. We're now heading down to Italy to see what's been going on there. Well, I've already described to you how society in general changed during the Gothic period, and there's a shift in sort of religious views and in just sort of the general ethos of people being more interested in the here and now, in their life on this earth. So now you're all ready to see this, what this means in Italy. So this is a city hall. It is not a church, and we're going to look at a bit of secular art. This is the Palazzo Publico, or the City Hall of Siena, Italy. So Italian culture and its arts developed in different ways than the northern cultures. The seat of the Roman Catholic Church was there in Rome, as were plenty of ruins and artifacts of ancient Rome. Many cities, including Siena here, had an ethos of civic identity with pride and responsibility that developed along with the emergence of a middle class. So in this city hall, an artist was commissioned to paint some murals. There's the building on the left. This is really the heart of the city, is the city hall. And in the city hall was this meeting room for the city council. That's how I've always understood this. And Ambrogio Lorenzetti was commissioned to paint murals around the wall of this. So I wanted you to see this so you can get a sense of scale, that these are human scale chairs. So you can see it's pretty large, but it's not gargantuan. And then keep in mind that this is where the city council would sit and discuss things that would benefit and affect all of the people living in the city of Siena. So the theme of the subject for the murals was the effects of good and bad government. And so he literally tried to illustrate why it was good to be good government and why it was bad to make bad decisions and do bad things. So this is one of the panels, and it's the effects of good government in the city. And this is a fascinating mural for a lot of reasons. So it shows an Italian city like Siena, and what happens in that city when everything is going smoothly and there's no outlaws and nothing bad is occurring. So you see a lot of building up, and up here on this roof you can even see some workmen who are doing some more remodeling or adding to. Over here is the wall of the city. So this should remind you a little bit of Rome when I showed you how the city had been walled in. That's just kind of a normal thing in history. So the wall of the city, and then there's an entrance over here. This is a gateway, and people are coming into the city from outside. People are going out. I'll show you what's on the outside a little bit later. But I want to show you the inside. So there are houses and shops. There are lots of little vignettes, little scenes that show you the life. Right in the foreground is people dancing in the street. And here's a shoe shop. I have details of these. But right behind it is a teacher who's like teaching or preaching. I think he's probably a professor teaching those students something. And more little scene, people moving about. So anyway, this is the effects of good government in the city. And here are the two details of the dancers in the street and the shoe salesman or cobbler. This is one I particularly like because this man has brought his donkey into the city and he needs a new pair of shoes. So he goes to the shoemaker, and up hanging on this wire up here are some sample shoes, so he could look at those and see if that's something he would like. But several people working in the booth to help him sell shoes. Now the dancers in the street always appeared to me as women, just kind of out, and there's a woman playing a tambourine here. But it's been suggested, and I think it's in the textbook, that these are actually men in drag dancing in the street. I've tended to reject that, but I just recently saw this very good detail of this, and I think that it might be men, in fact. And I'm basing this on the hairstyles because women always had long hair and they would grow it long and they would braid it or wrap it up under their hair. If they were single women, they would let their hair flow long, and if they were married women, they would bind it up under some kind of a headdress. And this looks like short hair to me. So women would not have had short hair. It makes me lean more towards it being men. And what exactly that is, I have no idea. So why men are out dancing in women's clothing. But anyway, it's the effects of good government in the city there. Just part of the scene, part of the many, many things happening. And this is on the outside of the gate of the city. So that's the same gate that I showed you. So this is a very long mural, and this shows the road leading out of the gate down into the countryside, and you can see farmers in their fields, you can see livestock, you can see people doing various activities. But the main idea here is that everybody is moving around peacefully. There's no robbers, there's no bandits, and everything is happy and hunky-dory because of good government in the city. There's also illustrations of bad government, but I'm not showing you those. You can go deep on that on your own if you wish. So now in Italy, which is a completely different environment, a classical revival of sorts led sculptors to draw inspiration from classical works in their environment, such as the sarcophagus on the left. So this piece on the right is a Gothic sculpture. I'm going to show you in its entirety in a minute. But this is the sort of things that the Gothic sculptors would have drawn on for inspiration. So they look at the ways that the classical artists, the Roman artists, had carved their figures and modeled their Gothic subjects on that. So it's biblical. Like this is biblical, this is pagan. Let's check it out. So here it is, larger. I just included that illustration so you could see why this Virgin Mary looks more like a Roman matron than she does this young virgin that we saw in France. So the marble pulpit in the baptistry of Pisa Cathedral contains a scene of the Annunciation and Nativity and Adoration of the Shepherds, all in one big conglomeration of a scene. And it's in an independent composition. Roman sarcophagi may have influenced the format, style, and technique of these heavy figures. Yeah, we think so. So here's the Virgin Mary lying down on a bed. Baby Jesus is in a little basket back here. And baby Jesus is also down here. He was getting his bath. He's lost his head in the meantime. Don't know how that could have happened. Some sheep down here. And this is the Annunciation up here with the angel telling. So it's like everything sort of combined in one big scene, and very classically inspired. So in other words, this doesn't look Romanesque. It doesn't look medieval. It doesn't really look anything like French Gothic, but it does look very classical, inspired. This is where it was. So we saw the campanile last time in Romanesque art and architecture. And it was placed in this building, in the baptistry, this pulpit. Now we're going to look at some more figural art in Italy. Not much architecture. I mean, there was plenty happening, but it's not at the same level as what was going on in France. So we're just not going to even pay attention to it. But we're going to look at some figural art, in particular painters, because the painting is going to change rapidly in Italy in the Gothic period and lead directly into the Italian Renaissance, which will be our next period in art. So several painters in Tuscany painted in popular Byzantine Italian style. Duccio painted a huge altarpiece for this cathedral. So this is the Siena Cathedral, and this is Italian Gothic. When I say it's nothing on the scale of the French, I think you can see. So this is the piece that Duccio painted for the Siena Cathedral. Duce de Buonasegna synthesized late late Byzantine style with linear French Gothic forms. The Maestà altarpiece for the Siena Cathedral was so large that it had to be painted on both sides as it could be seen from all directions. It was dismantled in 1771 and lacks cohesion of its elements today. So, meaning that there are separate panels, like this large center panel, and all of these little pieces were separate, and these little sections down here were separate, and they've all been sold off to different museums in different parts of the world. So, this composite of bringing them together was done virtually with the magic of computers. So let's look at this thing, really enormous. The main panel is 13 feet long and 7 feet tall. So now you can sort of imagine how huge the thing would have been. So it was plopped down in the middle of the cathedral. And this center panel here shows the Virgin Mary seated on what's called an architectural throne because it resembles the architecture and not any architecture, in fact, the very style of architecture of the Siena Cathedral. So you can see little windows and various structures there. So she's seated on this, and this represents her as the church. So everything becomes like heavily symbolic and meaningful. And just like in France, there's no filler here. Everything is done with intention. So Mary seated, serving as a throne for Jesus, and Mary is seated on a throne of the church. Mary is the church. Mary has this mystical union with her son Jesus. Jesus is married to the church. I don't know, it gets complicated. But let's look at these. So I said it's Byzantine related. So you can see gold in the background. You can see the figures. Most of them are treated almost like Byzantine icons. The figure of Mary and Jesus, in fact, look more like Byzantine icons than anything else. This is one of the scenes. I believe it's from the back side of that. One of those little lower scenes. The lower register is called the Pradella. So this is one of the Pradella scenes. And it shows Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. So this has 1 foot in the Byzantine style and 1 foot looking forward. So let's look at the Byzantine stuff first. So the background is gold, showing that this event is a supernatural event. It's a spiritual event. In other words, don't worry about where it is. It doesn't matter. It's Jesus raising this man from the dead. So here's Lazarus all wrapped up like a mummy being called forth from the tomb. If you've read the story in the Bible, Lazarus has been dead for a few days. And one of the people with Jesus said, "Oh, Master, you can't expect him to come back to life. He's going to smell. He's going to stink because he's already rotting." And so this man in yellow is even covering his nose because he thinks Lazarus is going to stink. And these are Lazarus' sister, Mary and Martha. So Jesus is also treated very much like an icon. But then you see some strange things down here, some real modeling of cloth where you get lights and darks and shading. So Duccio is trying out some new painting techniques in this. And it's tempera on gold on wood. Let's keep an eye on this. We're going to see baby steps. So let's go to Florence. So Siena is a little town near Florence up in the north of Italy, but Florence is down in the valley on the Arno River, and it's much more important. It will become much more important, both politically and economically during the Renaissance. So this artist is called Cimabue, or Cine di Pepi. Cimabue probably painted the Virgin and Child enthroned, so it's not completely known. He didn't sign it, but it's really high, 12 feet tall. And here we have a Virgin and Child also treated like an icon, very frozen, very iconic in their poses. Look at the baby Jesus. I mean, he doesn't even look like a little baby. Angels are weightless. They have a gold background. There's just sort of floating up. The figures under the architectural throne represent Old Testament prophets who foretold of the coming of Christ, and this is just to remind you that they did that. This would have been placed in a church in Florence, and now it's in an art gallery. But notice that architectural throne again, resembling the architecture of the churches around in Florence. So this is Cimabue. And then our next artist we're looking at, who was a student of Cimabue, is Giotto di Bondone. And Giotto really changes everything. Giotto, within his lifetime, becomes a world-famous artist, the most famous artist in Italy while he's still alive. And I'm going to show you some of the reasons for that. So this is the same subject, very close in time to the Cimabue, but a world of difference. So to begin with, the Virgin is painted much more naturalistically. You can even see the swelling of her breasts with that shading and the highlighting there. Her robe here showing where her knees are with highlights of lighter blue. The angels around her, the saints and angels, even appear to have weight to their bodies because they're not just sort of floating randomly in the sky. But she still stood in an architectural throne. So I mean, it's baby steps. Here are the two side by side. Cimabue, the teacher, the painting from 1280, and about 25 years later, his student Giotto does the same subject. The Cimabue Virgin's clothing, the highlights here are done with shots of gold, just because it's in that Byzantine style, and you use gold to honor the subject. But Giotto's leaning more towards a naturalistic depiction of the folds, and the folds here also look very much like a Byzantine icon's treatment. And look at the difference in the babies. Okay, so now that you've gotten a foretaste of Giotto, we're going to look at this huge project that Giotto did. This is in the town of Padua. So I told you he was famous. He became the most famous artist in Italy. And when this job came up in Padua, he was hired because he was the best of the best. So Signor Scrovegni was a money lender in Padua, and he was getting old. And he's got that same mentality of the Romanesque period, of this fear of hell, of purgatory, and trying to do what he can to avoid being stuck in purgatory forever. So instead of going on a pilgrimage, which he probably did as well, went to Rome, he would have gone to Rome, he decided to endow this little chapel in his town and to hire the most famous artist in the world to cover it with paintings. And so he hired Giotto, and Giotto came up there and covered this chapel. It's just a very simple structure. It's not interesting at all. It's just a simple nave with a barrel vaulted roof. There's no windows. There's nothing Gothic happening here. Nothing Gothic. It's like a total Romanesque building. So Giotto covers the wall with 3 registers of scenes, of little squared framed scenes. And this lower register also is painted by Giotto. It's fake. It looks like sculpture and marble, but none of that's real. It's just all fake and painted on there. So in the scenes around the wall, the upper register are scenes from the life of the Virgin, which mostly does not come from the Bible, so it's apocryphal, we would say. It's not biblical. The next register are scenes from the life and the ministry of Jesus. So, for example, here you can see the baptism, and here is his first miracle of turning the water into wine. And then the lowest register is the passion and crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. So I'm going to show you some of these details, but I wanted you to get the whole theme. So it is kind of like an art installation where the entire environment was created, and the vault on the ceiling was painted blue with little gold stars on it. The Annunciation Scene occurs split here by this opening of the altar. So you have the angel Gabriel on one side and Virgin Mary on the other side. So let's see some details. So here's from the north wall of the chapel, 4 of the panels from, this is often called the Arena Chapel or the Scrovegni Chapel. A narrative set of frescoes on the north wall portray Jesus performing his first miracle, the raising of Lazarus, the lamentation, and the resurrection. Figures twisting create human drama. Mourning over the dead Jesus gives way to the movement of Jesus away from the painting in the resurrection. This is moving away, the resurrection. So let's look at a couple of these close-ups. So on the left is the cleansing of the temple. So Jesus drove money changers out of the temple. It's one of my favorite scenes. But on the right, the lamentation. So you can notice in both of these that Giotto is making an attempt to create something that it looks illusionistic, meaning it looks like what the scene would seem if you were actually standing and looking at it. And this is illusionism. He's making a lot of effort, and we haven't seen this before. So, for example, notice the shading on the drapery and the bulk, like people seem to have really substantial bodies. And we're going to look at the lamentation on the right in some depth. So a couple of things to point out. First of all, the use of gold background is gone. So we saw him using it in the Virgin and Child from Florence, but it's not here. I think all of the scenes in Padua have blue backgrounds, blue sky. So he's showing us a sky that's like the sky we see outside. So it's in our world. We can relate to it. This is the scene where Jesus' dead body has been removed from the cross, and his mother is cradling him in her arms and weeping. And his followers are gathered around, and everybody's visibly upset. Angels are clustered in the sky, also upset. They're crying, they're writhing in misery. So Giotto did a lot of things besides use a blue sky here. He created bulky figures. He used this piece of rock to lead your eye down here to the focal point in case it was prone to wander. This is where he wants you to look, where Jesus's face is so close to Mary's face. And then he's trying to give you a sense, again, of that naturalism. And he does this by having this group of people cluster around or huddle around in a natural way, instead of lining up in an orderly way like we would see, and we have seen lines of saints and angels. But here he even shows us 2 figures from the back. We can't even see their faces. We don't know who they are, because he's attempting to give us that sense of immediacy, of realness here. So this is Giotto, and this is why he has such an awesome reputation, being the best artist in the world. Now, the motivation for this, like I said, for Signor Scrovegni was not unlike the motivations of the Romanesque period. And on the back wall of the Arena Chapel, this is the back wall. Down here at the bottom is the door that one comes in and goes out. So when you're leaving the church, you would turn around and go out. And the subject matter painted up here is exactly the same iconography that appeared on Romanesque pilgrimage churches. It is the judgment. It is Jesus sitting as judge and determining whether people's souls are good enough to fly up and join the choirs of angels in heaven. Here are a row of saints with halos. And so are you good enough to make that cut, or will you be condemned to hell? And I included a detail here of the devil just because he's so creepy, but this is the medieval imagination. This is what happens if you're sent to the bad place. that there's a big devil who will take little people like you and me, and these are souls again. Remember, the naked people are souls. And he's just shoving them into his mouth, and then he's excreting them down here. It's not a pleasant thought at all. You don't want that to happen to you for sure. But this is that scary thing. Like if you don't behave, if you don't do good, you're going to end up in hell. So the medium that Giotto used here was fresco. And fresco is new to us. It was done by the Romans, but it's being revived and used for a lot of church decoration, will be for a little while, where a person covers a wall, a stone wall, with plaster, and while the plaster is wet, takes water-based paint. It's just like watercolor paints, and paints it onto the wet plaster, and then it soaks into the plaster and becomes part of the wall. And that is very, very permanent. So all those paintings we just saw by Giotto were fresco on the wall. So as long as the wall is standing, the painting's there. So because he was so esteemed and he was considered a genius in his own time, it is thought that a genius is so gifted by God that a genius can do anything. Anything. A genius can paint pictures, can make sculptures, write poetry, plays, must be brilliant in every aspect of life, and can design buildings. So Giotto was given the task of designing the Campanile, the bell tower here in Florence. So this is the Florence Cathedral, and this is the bell tower designed by Giotto. So I just am pointing out he sort of embodies what people associate with a Renaissance man, which is coming. We're not at the Renaissance quite yet, but Giotto gives us a hint of what's to come and this great esteem that comes to artists who do well. So that's it for your Gothic lectures. This was the end of part 3.